Hi, my name is Martin Purnell and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who do or don't go to church and for those that are disillusioned. On today's Off-Grid Christianity is a gentleman who believes in faith roots of radical love, inclusion and justice, and that these can be used in asset management today. But what has a village in India and the Medici family from the 15th century got to do with faith roots? Can Christians be involved in high amounts of assets in today's cutthroat world of profit? Well, we better speak to our guest today, Steve Cole, to find out. Steve, thank you for joining us.
No worries, it's great to be with you.
Hopefully you'll say that at the end as well. Loads to ask. Obviously, many people have heard about asset management today. People most probably think, what is asset management? So no doubt we can talk about that later on. And what the Medici family has to do in today's 21st century way of making money. But before we do all that, let's ask you 5 really difficult questions, if that's right, Steve.
Yeah, no worries. That's far away.
Right. Well, if you're sitting comfortably, let's begin then. Question 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be?
Well, I have gone down the music route. I'm passionate about music. And there are 2 guys who actually, one of them is a musician, but he's also really well-known scientist. So I'm going to start with Brian Cox, who started down the music route, but
he did.
Now kind of taken over arenas to do science lectures, which was extraordinary. I went to the O2 Arena a couple of weeks ago with my daughter, and you've got 13,000 people sitting there to watch a science lecture, which is just beyond comprehension. And I understood about kind of 10% of it, but it was totally mind-blowing. So it would be Brian Cox, because I just think he's kind of taken things to the limits and blows the fuses and expands the mind. And I just love taking things to the limits of understanding. And then musically, the person that is like that also, that's somebody who's taken music to the limits, is a guy called Jacob Collier. And I think he's under 30, from London. He's already won about 6 Grammys and multi-instrumentalist. And when you've got people like Herbie Hancock and Quincy Jones in awe of this guy, who want to manage him, who want to work with him, and now in a position where everybody wants to work with Jacob Collier. But you listen to him talk about music, and it's almost like a spiritual kind of experience. And, his kind of thing is, well, why are we not exploring the vista between kind of C and C sharp? Why are we so restricted to kind of the notes that are on our keyboard? What about the space in between? And it's like, so what in an afternoon, if I need a pick me up and I can't do a coffee, then it's always Jacob or Brian. Wow. So I'd love to bring those guys together and kind of have a meal and, blow the fuses together.
And of course, I'd like to know, if you did bring them 2 together and you sat there, how long would it be before someone says, well, things can only get better, Brian?
There you go.
Yeah, and those people are thinking, what are you on about, Martin? A band called D-Ream, that was their big hit. And of course, he played the
Mate, you're on it.
Good answers. Never heard of Jacob Collier? Well, I have now. I better check him out. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character, or favourite biblical story, or favourite parable?
Yeah, so nature is a big part of my life, and part of what I do is actually bring leaders out of London into where I live in Kent, and I just think there's somebody who talks about nature being both a call and an answer, which I'd absolutely love. And I love the way Jesus also talked about nature and just gives us these compelling visions, I think, of life. And there's one for me that is when Jesus in John 15 just talks about, I am the vine and you are the branches.
Yeah.
And I just think that whole picture of dependency and that whole picture of closeness and potential And I think that in the world where self-sufficiency and independence are really strong magnets, I think this picture just provides us with a compelling challenge to be saying, actually, this is front and center in the terms of dependency.
Great answer. I could wax lyrical about You Are the Vine bit. There was a book that came out. Do you remember the In book of about 20 years ago? Once we'd all got on over the shack, the next book that came along, I think, was The Prayer of Jabez or The Prayer of Jabez.
Oh yeah,
do you remember that? Well, the chap who wrote that, he then wrote a sequel called Secrets of the Vine, and it's only a short book, about 100 pages, but absolutely blew my mind. And the next time I read it, I was thinking, wow, I can't wait to read this chapter. It turned out to be just one page. But
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was all about pruning and the fact that as a Christian, we tend to forget that, if we're going to be discipled properly, then we have to be pruned. And that, the older you are and, the more God expects of you, the more pruning has to go back down to the rootstock.
Yeah.
And we keep forgetting that. And it gave a fantastic picture of how he was out one day. They'd just moved to a new house miles from nowhere. And he saw the chap next door absolutely hacking to death his vine. And he said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, He said, "You're a townie then, aren't you? You don't know about this." So he explained it. And he said, "Look, if you just have all the leaves, then the sun isn't going to get into the grapes. So we have to take it all back so that the grapes can be seen. Hence the pruning." Anyway.
And the extraordinary thing is, since even kind of, I think it was 2004 when kind of science has just, there's an amazing TED talk by, what was her name? Can't remember her name now, but she talked about how trees talk to one another as well. And this whole world that we had no comprehension about just opened up again this new vista of just the way that, vineyards work in a really interconnected kind of way through mycelium networks of, that distribute carbon and distribute water and information and just our understanding of something so ancient, even in the last 20 years, has been expanded. And, just that whole interconnected thing, which is again why I take people out into nature. People who are spending their lives in the city, it's like we need to come and we need to remember, for instance, that life is not just about permanent spring and summer, that actually for us to have spring and summer and fruit, we also need autumn and winter. And yet we try to do life and business that avoids winter by every way. And actually winter is just one of the most powerful, extraordinary seasons where the nutrients that have been lost in the soil are being restored back in. And we just sometimes forget, and try and live kind of in this utopia spring and summer. And it just is, yes, that's absolutely right for a little time. Yeah. But actually for those times to kind of really come into their own, we also need autumn and winter.
Good point. And you said the word mycelium, which I think is off the coast of Italy, isn't it?
It's mycelium, my cause, or whatever word you want to use. Mate, we're going to expand the language today. We're going to take things to the edges. We're going to do a Brian Cox and a Jacob Collier.
Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day, I think I might have an idea where you're going on this one, and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be, please, Steve?
Well, it's probably as a result of just a few meetings I've had recently, actually, with some people in politics. And for me, it would be to have compassion and empathy at the heart of every law and decision and debate. So what if compassion and empathy, what if everything went through those two words? What would Ofsted look like? What would our education system be if the top-down starting point was compassion and empathy? What would our immigration and asylum dynamic be like? Thousands of people who are escaping conflict or famine or economic hardship. So for me, it would be looking to change the culture of power and leadership. We've just heard recently the toxic nightmare kind of trickle down word, which is a kind of an economic word, but what trickles down from a politics of love and compassion and empathy and justice and equity. So for me, being a prime minister for the day, I think that would be a kind of a come on. It would be to go upstream and to be saying, right, what is the trickle down and what is it for us to start with compassion and empathy? And as I said, I had a meeting recently with various people who are really on the front foot, really influential within these spheres, who are doing some really great pieces of work that is seeking to get us to this point. I think there's a hunger like never before to be saying, this is a broken system, this is a broken politics. And actually, we need to be reimagining a politics of love and empathy and compassion.
When are you running for the next MP ship?
Oh, I tell you, I actually was with our local MP last week, and he came to the food bank that I volunteer at for 3 hours a week. And obviously not to pick up some food, but
yeah, thank you for clarifying
that. But to just to kind of visit the work. And I just said to him then, I said, mate, you've got the most impossible job where, he's a guy who is involved in GCHQ, kind of MI5, kind of huge issues of security that he can't talk to people about. And then he's got national politics, and then he's got local surgeries of people coming and talking about their kind of the fact that they can't pay for their energy. And it's like, how can one person hold all that together? And I just thought, wow, yes, of course we critique and we criticize, but actually they're human beings at the end of the day. And, I think that we need to be standing with them more.
Great answer. Thank you very much indeed. I thought you'd bring more nature into it. I got that bit wrong. Question 5. Question 4, in fact. Outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out, Steve?
So I founded a charity called Artisan in 1996, and it was supporting people in the media and the arts and the fashion industry. And one of the cities that hosted Artisan was New York. And so I invested such a lot of time into New York, just kind of building connections and relationships with kind of all the organizations who are supporting people of faith in the media and the arts and fashion industry. And so New York has always been a special and significant place for me. And but there was this one day where me and my wife were invited to a wedding in New York, and I bizarrely married this couple in Boston the day before, and we flew down then to New York on the Saturday. And this couple, an extraordinary, beautiful, creative, influential couple, were able to wangle the top floor of the Soho Grand Hotel, which was the penthouse suite, which had a balcony on it that could seat 80 people. And so some of my favorite people in the world, together, me and my wife just had this afternoon on this balcony watching New York kind of light up. It was in the summer.
Yeah.
And it was just the most extraordinary day with some of your favorite people and your wife, and kind of, in this city that really brings you alive. And yeah, just a day I'll never forget.
Brilliant. Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment to date, please, Steve?
Oh, so many. So I'm just going to give you my most recent, which was like literally a couple of weeks ago. And I had this, I was speaking in front of a few hundred people. And one of my weaknesses in speaking is I always just go off piste and, just never stick to the script. And my issue was that I went off piste this one time, and then I tried to come back to the thread of my talk, and my mind went absolutely like AWOL.
Yeah.
I was so tired, and I looked down, and I literally could not work out where I was. And then I realised at that moment that I'd forgotten to number the pages. I'm still old school and speaking, from pieces of paper that have been printed out. And so after silence of me trying to compose myself, I still couldn't find it. So I thought, right, I think I could go for this and just wing it and do it from memory. So I came away from the safety of the lectern, the security that you get from standing behind your notes and your lectern. I just thought, right, I'm going to go for it. And then about 15 seconds in, it's going disastrously. And my mind is so mushy. And so in the end, I just said, guys, I'm so sorry, but I have no idea what I'm saying or where I am. Can you just give me 2 minutes? Because I just need to stop and find my place again, And it's just that moment, isn't it, of being, a few hundred people in front of you, and you go absolutely blank, and that vulnerability and that embarrassment. So that was my most recent.
Yeah, but you did the right thing, didn't you? You stopped.
Yeah, and but the ironic thing, it's good learning, isn't it?
Yeah.
The thing of like, right, I could do this. Let's wing it. Let's move away. And there are moments where I could have done that, but it was a talk that I was given, a title that I was given, and so I really was quite dependent on my notes. And so anyway, good bit of learning.
Yeah. Go on then. What was the title of the talk?
It was. Oh, mate, you've really got me there. You've got me off the notes. That's the thing. So, mate, I can't remember.
Roughly, rough ballpark.
Oh, it was at church, and we were doing a series on prayer, and I was kind of asked to do a kind of a kind of specific aspect of it. So that was the kind of I can't remember the detail now. It's just so funny, isn't it? How you just life just moves on, and it's probably something I try to forget as quickly as possible. I just had to come down, and I had to kind of come home and lie down.
I'm sure people felt really good about the fact that you were able to say, "Oh, well, hang on, let's just take."
You know what? It was quite a great thing actually, because people came up to me and just really thanked me for just kind of not being polished and and all that, and they quite like that. But a few people come up to me and go, when you ask people to just kind of chat to people behind you and find people that you've never met before. I had people coming up going, I had the most amazing conversation with the person sitting behind me that I've never met before, and we're going to meet for coffee next week. So thanks so much for that, And so even in the kind of the brokenness and there's stuff that goes on, and I think that we do put ourselves under crazy pressure, don't we, for that kind of 20 minutes on a Sunday. What are we doing? And so good learning all round, really.
No, that's brilliant. But I just want to pick up on something you said in one of the questions. You bizarrely married a couple in Boston. Yeah. Right. I did not know that you were in the ministry of any sort, so tell me more.
No, it was, so as I said, I founded this charity providing support for people in media and arts and fashion. And so we had this this network, this under the radar kind of work that we did in different cities. And this couple who were actually, she was American and he was from London. And they got married in Boston, and they asked me to kind of marry them. And I'm not a vicar or a reverend, so they had to have somebody kind of legally in the mix as well. But that was a real honor and privilege. And I've married 2 couples, and I haven't done one in the UK yet. So it's really the other one was in Italy, which was just crazy. And just again, this a couple that are involved in the creative industries, wanted to get married. And so it was a real joy. And so we literally flew into Boston on the Friday, married this couple on I think that's right, Saturday afternoon, flew to New York on the Sunday morning. This couple got married on Sunday afternoon, and then we flew back Monday. So it was an epic weekend, that one.
As you do.
Yeah.
As you do. Well, how did you get involved in the creative industry side then?
Yeah. So, again, just using that word, winging it all the way, which will probably be, the common word that goes through this next 5 hours together. But I'm a passionate musician, and I was actually working with Oasis Trust when
Steve Chalk.
In the early days of Oasis Trust, and I owe such a lot to Chalky for believing in me and as a kind of a 21-year-old, and I took a year out on their frontline team, which is where I met my wife Rachel. And so, but the passion I had was music, and I had the privilege of just working with some amazing musicians, and one guy who I spent quite a bit of time with at the age of 19 got a phone call from Boy George and said, "I'd really love you to come and tour America with me as my keyboard player."
What?
And so here's a guy who was kicked into church, good spiritual infrastructure of support around him. And then all of a sudden, he's touring America with Boy George, and obviously church not seeing him for a long time, and just recognised that there were so many people who were involved in the creative industries, and it was a specific of music, who just to have that kind of root system of home and church and people, when that was taken away, actually they were quite isolated and vulnerable. And the spiritual implications of that decision of going on tour with Boy George is quite a major decision. And so I was just wanting to love and support, these kind of people. And we set up Artisan in 1996 and created publications written by people in the industry, for people in the industry. And then we started to gather people in London. And we had this kind of group of us that were meeting like a house group. And it was, people who were involved in the heart of the industry, which was really amazing. And I just shared this vision of what would it be for unity, humility, and prayer to be right at the heart of these industries. Humility, we're important, but we're not the key. We recognize kind of our calling ultimately. Unity, we need one another like never before, and prayer being a kind of a real important thing that brings us together and reminds us of our roots and reminds us of the source of our creativity and ideas. And so I just shared this kind of vision with this group, and then we took the craziest kind of decision to take on this venue in Oxford Street in London and invite just our creative mates, to come and unite, humble themselves and pray. And to our amazement, a few hundred people turned up.
Wasn't the 100 Club, was it? Or the Marquee? Was it the Marquee? or the 100 Club?
No, it was I can't remember the venue now. It was like 1998.
Yeah, sorry. So a few hundred people turned up. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, a few hundred people turned up, and so then aligned with an amazing church called St. Mary's in Marylebone, which was just a church of 1,000 people, and, average age of about 24. Huge percentage of people involved in the creative industries. We just started doing monthly gatherings, and we ended up doing about 400 gatherings in 18 cities around the world, and just creating this sense of community for people in the industry who just felt isolated, maybe who wanted a sense of community. So I was speaking to somebody the other day who was working with Alexander McQueen as a fashion designer in London, and then kind of was part of the Artisan in London, and then went to work with a designer in Tokyo, and wanted to take the kind of Artisan values and what we were seeking to do into Tokyo. And so she set up Artisan there, and it was just that whole there was just a time. We kind of ran for about 18 years, and most of my role was just under the radar, coming alongside people, providing that pastoral support, kind of blue sky, bringing people together. Wow. And so, and then after 18 years, just sensed the time was right to put it in the ground and to finish the organisation. And that was quite a humbling thing when for 18 years your identity is known as the founder of something, Yeah. And but we finished with a party. When was the last time you went to an event to finish something? And it's like so many organizations just keep going and keep going. And we just sensed we wanted to model something of finishing well, and to have a party and to raise a glass. And so we finished with a party with 300 people coming together in London with videos from different cities. And then I kind of walked the fields the following day and literally kind of put a pile of stones to mark the story in my field, cried my eyes out for an hour. I never cried like that before in my life before, and let go the organisation. But with the faith kind of that there would be sparks all over the place as a result of what we've done. But, wow. Just didn't want to, just felt as far as the organisation was concerned that we needed to do something radical and put it in the ground.
Wow. Well, before we go, I want to delve a bit more into that, if that's right, Steve. But if you go into Off-Grid Christianity and look at all the previous episodes, there's a gentleman I interviewed, I can't remember which episode number it was. His name is Christ Otto, Chrisist. Looks like Christ, but it's pronounced Christ. He does what you're doing, or he did do. He's can't speak properly. He's doing that now, called the Belonging House. And he's looking after authors, poets, people like that, artists in particular, doing what you did. So it's great to know that people have got a vision like you had, and are running with it. But and actually, part of the reason we set up, and there are brilliant people and organisations doing this thing, and this is not by any means an exclusive thing that we were doing. But and part of our role also is to be signposting people to other organisations who are doing things with a different emphasis, and so it was never kind of trying to just build a brand. But it was. But the interesting thing is that our last gathering, people would just come up to me and just kind of go, "Oh, this is still going on as a result of kind of what you started here." And and sometimes I just think, that there's a call to relinquish control, to let go, as difficult as that is, especially when, humanly your identity is wrapped around a kind of a brand or an organisation. And I think there's such a challenge, isn't there, to continually hold things lightly, and to again, just coming back to the seasons, there has to be a winter time, and for us to stop, to consolidate,
for the nutrients to come back in the soil. So yeah, it was quite a ride, quite an experience.
That's brilliant. But how many people are prepared to do that? You know, to say, right, oh, it's going so well, let's cancel. So what were the telltale signs for you to say, I've got to relinquish now, I've got to let go?
So there was definitely a peak. And then, for all kinds of different reasons, that peak just starts going on a kind of downward trajectory. And I don't, you know, I'm absolutely up for things being the significance of the small and all the rest of it. But there was a definite moment where, you know, I just thought, I think we are done as an organisation. I think we have done what we have set out to do. I think, you know, we built a network of about 5,000 people who were all receiving kind of publications and all free of charge. I don't quite know how we did it, but there was just a moment of like going, and also I think increasingly churches were properly getting their act together, and you know, to ask the question, what is it to support people effectively who are in industry, who are in business, who are in media, who are in creativity. And I think part of it was actually, you know, if the church is really doing what it should be doing, you shouldn't really need para organisations who are doing it. And so part of it was about that as well, to be saying, actually, the church is really stepping forward and understanding their role as backline, supporting people who are right in the heart of music industry and fashion and design and film and theatre and dance and choreography. So I think it was just, you know, recognising all that. But it was still tough, mate, because, oh, my life, you know, this is what I've been known for. This is what I've been doing for 18 years. And but after I had bawled my eyes out in the field the day after my last gathering, you know, it was like, right, okay, you know, what comes next?
Well, indeed, what does come next? So tell us more then, especially as I've already mentioned a couple of times, the Medici family from the 15th century and faith roots. So put it all together. What happened next, sir?
Yeah, mate, do you want the 12-inch remix dance version, or do you want...
You're talking my language. I'd love to hear parts of the 12-inch remix dance version.
Yeah, no, so in short, there was a time where, for various reasons, the guy who was leading our church just had to step down. And so I'm involved in a church in Tunbridge in Kent, a Baptist church, it's just phenomenal, the work that they do within the context of community and with youth and children. And so there's probably about 2,000 people a week coming through the church, just because it's so fused in the kind of context of neighborhood and community. And so there was a kind of staff team, mainly part-time, of about 18 people. And so I finished Artisan, and this kind of issue came up about a month later, at a time where I'm kind of in that land of in between, really seeking for kind of the next pathway. And then in short, hilariously, because again, no theological training or anything like that, this church asked me to kind of lead the team, and until they found another leader. So I thought that would be about 3-5 months, you know, max, because I don't see it as a central part of my calling. You know, I see absolutely the value of it, but I've never seen myself, you know, in that role, even though my granddad was and my uncles are, and, you know, families are church leaders, but I've never seen myself in that role before. But I just sensed there was something in it that was so right, and it turned out to be 2 years part-time, where I had the privilege actually of leading the team and really getting into the heart of people in the community and into the lives of church, and that was quite extraordinary. So that and then I was so relieved to be able to hand that over to somebody who knew what they were doing. Oh my life, that was one of the happiest days of my life. And so that's great. But I'm still involved in kind of some of the stories that are happening in the community with people, struggling with addictions or food poverty or energy poverty. So still right in the heart of that kind of local dynamic. But then I was asked by an amazing business leader called James Perry, and he approached me with they run a family trust called Panaper, and it's a family trust that kind of roots back to 1907 when this British engineer called Colonel Jacobs set up an amazing kind of work of a place of refuge for orphan children. And that place was called Panaper in India, which means place of refuge. And just to cut a long story short, the kind of some assets kind of came into the charity through the sale of buildings, and they initially kind of did the traditional thing of a drawdown, supporting charities through this fund. And then James brilliantly just kind of said to the board, you know what, we need to be we have an opportunity to disrupt the whole asset management. And it's, people, we all have kind of, not maybe all of us, but many of us, have pension pots that are being invested by asset management companies. And what would it be for us to reimagine the whole asset management world, and for our kind of investments to be invested into social and economic good, things that are going to enhance the planet rather than be a detriment to it. And so courageously, with another charity called the Golden Bottle Trust, started a Snowball, which is today an asset management with a kind of separate team, and investing, millions into companies that are seeking to bring flourishing in social and economic, social and environmental, and so what that left then was, right, well, what do we do with this kind of trust? Now we've got Snowball, the asset management has taken off. And so James was like, Steve, would you help us to reimagine what we could be doing as a charity? And James is just brilliant in the terms of at the heart of, business with purpose, which is what his background is, and kind of asset management. And we recognized together that there was a real need to support leaders, recognizing that so many leaders who are kind of operating in the context of emergency and crisis through environment or social or whatever, these are some of the most isolated people. And so, so in short, they asked me to come and provide that support to leaders. And then which we did through one-to-one support, inviting people out of London, walks. And then we were having gatherings, bringing people out of their silos, out of their echo chambers. So we, inspired by the Medici family, who were bringing scientists and business people together with creatives and musicians. And it's like, we're so often guilty of just having the same group of people in the room, and the Medici, what they seek to do was just to kind of go, come on, we need the creatives alongside the bankers, we need the musicians and the filmmakers, and we need the non-profit, and we need it all around the board table. And so inspired by that, we were just bringing together heads of banks, political think tanks, people from tech, people from innovation. Then alongside that would be musicians and filmmakers, and we would be meeting in London, and then COVID kicked in.
Yeah.
it was like, oh my life, we were building a bit of a head of steam, and then we couldn't gather people anymore. And that's where we kind of creatively launched this venture called Wonderspace. Yeah, we've kind of been on this creative expression since then. That is just bringing leaders together around wonder and hopefulness. And it's a weekly podcast that is orbiting around 6 questions that we ask everybody. And so we've done 95, I think, now.
Yeah.
And just interviewing leaders from around the world around wonder and hopefulness, recognizing that alongside crisis and emergency, which is the narrative that we're all hearing all the time, is always stories of hopefulness. There is always an alternative story to tell. And I spent a lot of time on when I was with the church, the Calais refugee camp. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that time where there was 9,000 people that turned up in Calais? It was about 6-7 years ago, and that's right on our doorstep in Kent. And it was, and so we just started investing time into, I did weekly visits for 9-10 months into the refugee camp, and just recognizing again, just leaders kind of in the grassroots who were isolated and needing support. So we've created this kind of Wonderspace as a kind of leaders from every sphere, from kind of refugee stuff to music producers to leaders in business to people who are architects from Homs in Syria, some extraordinary leaders who are seeking to, reimagine and do the extraordinary thing.
Because obviously you wear very much on your sleeve your heart, and so people find out very quickly that you're a Christian. How does that go down in asset management land, where profit is everything, or apart from the company that you're talking about? How does that go down?
Yeah, we don't have a problem with profit. Profit is important for business and employment. I think the question for us is, it's profit by any means. And the problem that we're facing now is that, profit has often come through, stripping assets in the terms of, mining for the things out of the earth. And it's a kind of an economic model, which is, we make profit by all means, by any means. And that's the thing that has been disrupted. And so and the interesting thing is, faith within the context of that is the most natural thing in so many ways. I think, Jesus was one of the great disruptors. He took people out of the comfort zones, and so kind of the whole thing of disruption. I think that's just a huge part of the kingdom of God. This is not just a nice, safe walk in the park. This is a kind of a battle in so many ways, and so but to be working out faith in the context of these spheres, like for me to be walking alongside leaders, I think increasingly, especially when there is a one-on-one kind of situation, I invite them into nature, because nature just shouts so loudly, and and very quickly it turns into the higher and the wider and the deeper kind of conversations and questions. And I think everybody, kind of whether they are kind of leaders in business or asset management or whatever it is, there is fundamentally a real hunger for the higher and wider and deeper. And you know what? I was at an amazing gathering of 1,000 leaders 3 weeks ago. It's called Anthropy. It was at the Eden Project in Cornwall. Mm-hmm. And these were leaders in politics and business and kind of non-profit. It was just the most extraordinary group of people come together. And And there was this amazing leader who stood up, and her words were, "We need a spiritual revolution." And it was like, oh my life, you know. And this was a keynote, and she, her name is Mary Porter. She's an amazing activist. She's kind of was asked by the government to kind of reimagine the high street. She used to work with Harvey Nicks.
Yeah, she's been on TV.
Yeah, she's a really amazing dynamic. She's all about better business, again, just trying to, business as a force for good in the world. This is so much of the narrative which I'm compelled by. I'm so excited by kind of the whole rising of the B Corp initiative, for instance, which is all about business not being set up just to make shareholders wealthy, but business set up as a force for good in the world. And so now we have 5,000-6,000 B Corps that are set up with a list a mile long of people who want to become B Corps, because again, it's that question of we're looking for the higher and wider and the deeper. This is so much more than just about making money. And Mary Portas, for her to say that, Anthropy, we need a spiritual revolution. She was quoting Gus Speth, who's a scientist in America who has been working with the government, who just quoted, we need a spiritual and cultural revolution, transformation. And there's just a real hunger. And that's, just such an opportunity not to steam in, but just to kind of come alongside and to be, there are moments, where you're walking alongside leaders, and it is so natural at the end of a walk to kind of put an arm on their shoulder and say, mate, are you up for me to pray for you? That would be a real honor. And nobody has ever said no to that question, because you've had 3 hours before that of building connection, allowing nature to speak loudly. And of course, you are talking about things that are higher and wider and deeper. So it's quite a ride. And so this family trust that I'm working with now is yes, we have the asset management side of things, but what we're really passionate about is just coming alongside leaders who are leading in systemic change, recognizing that within the kind of context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of 2030, recognizing within all the energy that's around the COP gatherings at the moment, these leaders the world is a different place every 3 months. It really is, isn't it? It feels a different place. And so what is it to come alongside leaders and to provide that kind of pastoral support, but also blue sky, let's get people into nature to kind of reimagine, to be coming together with ideas. Let's be bringing the right people together, and so much again of our, remit is, we need the right people in the room, and we need the left brain and the right brain, and we need, the creators in the mix, and we need the storytellers in the mix. We need to be telling a different kind of story. And that's what Wonderspace is about as well. We need to be telling a different kind of story. If you want to change a society, you have to tell the alternative story. Yeah.
Well, right at the very beginning, as you know, I said our podcasts of Greek Christianity is for those that are disillusioned. And no doubt you've met hundreds of people, I would have thought, because of the way Artisan set up. How disillusioned have you been in the past?
You know what? I think that there's definitely been moments of, autumn and winter, and where you are taken to the limits of faith. And, I think there's been a real challenge, not necessarily to look for a door out of the valley, out of the kind of the dark places, but just to kind of take real learning and understanding, and this life of faith, as I said, you look at the life of Christ and you're not seeing a lot of utopia.
Mm.
You're seeing, I often ask the question, where were the 5,000 people at the end of the story? You from a PR and marketing kind of standpoint, Jesus's life was an absolute nightmare. It was a disaster. He kind of started the ministry, with such a buzz and kind of momentum. And today we'd have kind of gone down that strategy of, right, same time, same place next week and bring a mate. And, Jesus is kind of working on just a whole parallel narrative. And I think that for me, definitely, just in the context of seeking to run an organization that's operating under the radar, just being misunderstood as to who you are and what you're about, and not have the titles, and but times where I've been taken to the limits, and there's a sense of winter being a really important part of the process. And I just remember being taken out with glandular fever when I was 40, a kind of teenage kissing disease.
Yeah.
You get it when you're 40, and I was right in the middle of Artisan and just about to go to New York again, and I was out for 4 months. And I remember just in that time where I am not in a good place at all, physically or any other way. It was actually in those times that kind of I just felt God leading and directing me in ways which were really significant at that time, and that could only have happened with me literally just being still. And so I think that winter, autumn, spring, summer, here we go. I think it's always more autumn and winter than spring and summer in my experience, but that is all part of the mix.
That's a very good answer. So for those that are listening then, that are feeling disillusioned, they're feeling that they're in winter, maybe part of the problem is they don't realise they're in winter and this is a good thing, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I just love the fact that perseverance and persistence are huge words in the New Testament. I just think it's just the common theme, isn't it? And just the whole, where have we got this kind of spiritual utopia from? And here's me coming from a root system of kind of, coming from a Pentecostal church, which is again all about the aspiration of being on a permanent mountaintop, and it just doesn't exist, and that's okay. And I think it's that perseverance and persistence, but understanding that love and grace is not conditional, and so our starting point is always love and grace. That's where we start, and again, that's a really important, in the terms of analogy, the mycelium network, the underneath, I think that's a real challenge to kind of have that root system, that we are known, that we are loved, and that grace is sufficient. And then it is, being adventurously expectant, those two words that come up in the message in Romans. I just love those two words. It's kind of in our brokenness, and the challenges of life. It's what is it to be adventurously expectant, and that sense of like, I have no idea what the next 3 months, 6 months looks like, but today I choose to be in a posture of dependency. Remain in me and I'll remain in you. The whole vine picture again. In every season, I choose to remain, but that whole thing of been adventurously expectant of like, what's next? What's coming up? Having the eyes open, the expectation that things kind of will evolve and develop, and and eventually we come into a kind of a sense of spring. That those days will be ahead.
You said a word there. It wasn't adventurously expectant, which is great 2 words. I'll try and use those again sometime. But you said a word earlier on, brokenness. And in last week's episode with Randall Flynn of Houston in Texas, he went off on one in the end and ended up talking about brokenness. So what does brokenness mean to you then, Steve?
Yeah, it's recognizing that, as I said, the magnets, of the culture in which we're in, are strong magnets. They are, and so often, that does lead to that place of kind of dislocation, because we are trying to work out faith in a world that is so deeply challenging. And brokenness, just on a kind of even just taking that kind of the business analogy, the brokenness that comes from our obsession around just top line, our obsession just about being around wealth. And I think, it's that kind of brokenness that we need to be kind of challenging on a kind of systemic level, and with our economics, that we are working within the context of a broken system. We are needing a new operating system. We're still running off an old economic operating system. And it's a sense of, so there's that kind of brokenness, but also then you're kind of working out your own incompleteness. You're working out your own contradiction. You're wanting to kind of be that sense of, right, come on, telling a different kind of story. You want to kind of be that the one who's forging away, but you recognize your own vulnerability. You recognize, one of my areas of brokenness is that sense of, I never feel as if I've earned the right to do what I've done. Artisan, I've never felt as if I had the professional right or the academic right, or the theological right to do anything of what I've done. I came out of school, at the age of 16 with 1 O-level and went into a youth training scheme, and that is an interesting root system that, where you never feel as you're always kind of dealing with the imposter, but then kind of going, right, okay, what is it for God to use the weak things, to confound the wise? What is it for God to use the ordinary and the small? And that's, how I've really felt, for myself of absolutely God using the weak and the ordinary. And that's kind of quite miraculous and hopeful.
Absolutely. How do you feel then when you're meeting all these important leaders and that you're just a little guy from Tunbridge in Kent, never been to university, never done A-levels? How do you feel then?
Yeah, after the first minute of you recognise that actually, that there is, you're finding your common ground, and the reality is, I've never found anybody in politics, business, arts, media, at whatever level, I've never found anybody who doesn't feel as if they're winging it. And I think actually, if you can just put a pin in that balloon quite early on and actually recognize, again, that word dependency, that people do recognize that they are vulnerable and dependent, then you're finding your common ground, and so that it's something you have to craft and find your way in. But it's interesting, and one of the things that we're seeking to do with Wonderspace is, we ask a question on Wonderspace, which is, what is your story of hopefulness that's not your own, about a person, business, or non-profit who are doing amazing things for the world? And so the purpose of that question is to get people from talking not about their own brand and organization and idea, but what is it for people to take the focus off themselves and into passionately promoting a brand, an idea, a person that's nothing to do with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just finding creative ways to express something of the kingdom of God, that's so upside down and back to front. We're building a kingdom and not a brand. And what is it for business leaders? So at Anthropy, with these 1,000 leaders, that's the question I was asking all these leaders for our podcast. And it was just very interesting because quite a number of people just said, I'm sorry, I don't know any, which is, again, really insightful, because they were just there to promote their idea and brand. And when you ask them to share about another, so again, it's, what in my ordinariness, in kind of, the lack of the right to do what I do, it's actually also challenging people to take focus off self and go, actually, could we see a movement? Could we see something develop where instead of LinkedIn, which is all about your self-promotion, actually you are known by the way that you talk about ideas and people and brands and organizations that's nothing to do with yourself? Because actually, I think that's a better insight of the way that you talk about something that's nothing to do with yourself.
Brilliant answer. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the remaining time that we've got before we get to the hero slot, and if anybody wants to contact you, they can do it through us, which would be ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz is spelled B-I-Z, ogc@accessradio.biz. Or alternatively, they can contact you as well, and I'll give you space at the very end, or should I say, I'll give you Wonderspace at the very end to give a plug for any ways that they want to contact you.
Great.
So, but leading up to the hero slot, the remaining time, then, sir, you started to become very vulnerable on this. Where do you see Christianity going, or at least going to church over the next few years? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think there's a central word in the B Corps movement, which is kind of these 5,000, 6,000 businesses that are signed up to, a business being a force for good in the world. That's very hopeful. But there's a central word, and it's called interdependence. And they sign a declaration of interdependence. And it's moving away from individualism into interdependence. And we need interdependence like never before. We need to come out of individualism into that space where we recognize that we need one another like never before. And I think the role of the church is crazy. Church is a miracle. If church happens, it really is a miracle. I don't know of any other kind of group of people that are so diverse on every level that can come together and move forward in a vision together. That is a miracle. And, and I think that, but what I see is, out of brokenness and out of that need to reimagine. I think COVID has knocked the stuffing out of, what we thought we knew, and has forced us into reimagining what kind of church could look like kind of moving forward. And in the same way that kind of business and impact investment and all these spheres are seeking to break new ground, I think it's a real opportunity for the church, of which it is in many ways, to be kind of seeing itself in a very different way. But I just want to encourage people that I see the kingdom of God just being expressed in such radical, wonderful terms. And we need to be looking beyond just our, beyond kind of the traditional kind of Christian organization or gathering, and see the way that God is working right in the heart of politics, right in the heart of business, right in the heart of arts and media and creativity. And I think there is a desire for convergence to come out of individualism into a sense of interdependence. We need one another like never before. And if church can just be a radical expression of what it is to model that, where, again, that whole emphasis of the platform is not the front and center, but actually the front and center are those who are carers and working in NHS, and those who are working in business and enterprise, and, and it's, again, that vision of the church being kind of backline, equipping and supporting and inspiring and encouraging people to be, in C.S. Lewis's words, little Christs, right in the heart of where the action is, then that's an exciting vision. That's an exciting place to be. And so I'm excited about what I see God is doing, and I'm seeing it through multiple lenses, and God is powerfully using people who don't yet know him. And that's what I'm excited by. And because I just don't think God has favorites. God is not just using Christians to bring the kingdom of God. He's using extraordinary people who they just don't know where the source is.
Yeah. Always remember having gone to Live Aid in 1985, and the questions have been asked, well, why has it taken Bob Geldof to do this? Why hasn't someone else got the mantle? And I wish I could remember who the journalist was, so the cartoonist in one of the national dailies. But it was a picture of God looking down on the world, and he'll go, and with a finger pointing down towards Dublin, he'll go, "Oh, he'll do," And it's There
we go.
Absolutely. Well, it's been fantastic listening to you, good sir. Thank you so much for what you've shared. If people would like to get hold of you because you've maybe pricked their conscience or they want to know more, how can they get hold of you, sir, apart from our little email address?
Yeah, so the 95 episodes of Wonderspace, which is a kind of the over kind of expression of the family trust. The website is ourwonder.space. That's ourwonder.space. And that's kind of the you can just find everything there and listen to they're all short form. So they're all about 15, 20 minutes long. But just get an insight into some of the leaders that we're talking about, and this kind of sense of wonder and hopefulness that's coming from this diverse group.
Fantastic. And I just thought if Noel Gallagher was listening, he could change the words to "and love and grace, it's Wonderspace."
There we go. He missed a trick.
He did, didn't he? Didn't he just?
He really did.
Let's go for your hero slot, and then we'll call it a day, good sir. Thank you so much, Steve. Steve Cole, who is your Christian hero?
So my Christian hero is John Newton.
Hey.
And I just think there's so much about his life which is extraordinary, and obviously he's known for being a hymn writer of extraordinary hymns like Amazing Grace. But when it comes to the slavery bill with Wilberforce, obviously Wilberforce, rightfully, for his persistence and perseverance, is the hero in the story. Of the being instrumental in the bill going forward. But John Newton was an extraordinary figurehead in the life of Wilberforce, as his mentor, as somebody who just walked alongside him, and also a campaigner himself, and just so inspired by the fact that it was in March in 1796, they were all so confident that the kind of slavery bill was going through. But what I didn't realise was that until recently, was that as a result of 6 MPs going to an Italian opera at the same time that the vote was happening, the bill didn't go through because there were four votes short. Can you believe that?
No.
And so because of the opera, the bill didn't go through, and so this left Wilberforce absolutely kind of at the end totally crushed. And he came to John Newton, and it was John Newton that just kind of brought him back to that whole thing of, this is a calling of God to serve in the House of Commons. And Newton wrote a letter to him and just said, "You are not only a representative for Yorkshire, you have the far greater honour of being a representative for the Lord in a place where many know him not, and an opportunity of showing them what are the genuine fruits of that faith which you are known to profess." And it was as a result of that pastoral, behind the scenes, hand on a shoulder, that Wilberforce kind of kept going, and again led to February 1807, the House of Commons voting to end the practice of trading in human beings. And I just want to raise a glass to John Newton.
Brilliant answer. And I think actually what John Newton said to Lord Shaftesbury there, not Lord Shaftesbury, sorry, William Wilberforce, could actually apply to you.
Well, you know what? That's what I'm just so, and I just want to raise a glass to everybody who is behind the scenes, who are those figureheads, those pastors, those supporters, those people who are encouraging those of people of influence on the front line to keep going, to keep persisting, to keep persevering. And I think that's just such we need that like never before.
Yeah, and of course Lord Shaftesbury, as I mentioned, he was also part and parcel of changing the slavery bill as well.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. What people don't know is that the statue of Eros is actually dedicated to Lord Shaftesbury. And when you look at it, because it's all about love, the idea was the statue was supposed to be firing the arrow down Shaftesbury Avenue. And when they cleaned it up 20, 30 years ago, they took the statue away. They came back, put a statue, and it was facing the wrong way. It was firing an arrow down a completely different street. So they had to change it.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah. See, stick with me, Steve. I'm full of useless information.
Here we go. That's so good.
Steve Colt, thank you so much for joining us today. And please keep in touch. It's been brilliant what you've shared. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Been a joy.